Mr. Mayor, you're now live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start today's meeting by acknowledging we're gathered here today on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people on National Indigenous Peoples Day. And the first item on the agenda, actually, you know what? First, I'll call this meeting to order with the quorum being present. And the first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. So I'll ask council, are there any items that you would like removed from the consent agenda for discussion under new business? Councillor Justice.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to pull item 2.2.1.
2.2.1 will be moved to new business. Any other items council would like moved to new business? All right, there being no others, I'll ask for a motion that council approve the consent agenda and the recommendations contained therein. Moved by Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Eustache. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to approval of the regular agenda. And as I believe council is aware, there was a change made to the agenda that was published on Friday. The change is with regards to item 8.4, with regards to the temporary noise bylaw exemption for work being done at the Crofton Terminal. There's been a slight change in the dates that were presented in the original agenda that was circulated. One change I would like to suggest to council is with regards to the Lower Chemainus River flood management plan. This is currently included under new business as item 11.1. And what I'd like to suggest to council is that we move it up on the agenda so that it will come immediately after Section 6, public input. I understand that we have residents of that area who would like to speak to the Chemainus Watershed Flood Management Plan, and would like to provide them the opportunity to see council's discussion to come immediately after public input. So again, moving item 11.1 to immediately follow Section 6, public input on agenda items. Yeah, moved by Councillor Manhas, seconded by Councillor Finley. Any discussion? No discussion, all in, no. Question, guys? Okay, just really eager to vote. Yeah. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to Mayor's report. And I'd first, I'd like to start this meeting by congratulating a member of North Cowichan's senior leadership team. Pleased to share with council that our very own Director of Parks and Recreation, Neil Pukesh, has after 2 long years completed his Master's in Leadership at Royal Roads University. This is a significant accomplishment at any age, but to take such an intensive commitment mid-career while also balancing family obligations, including coaching his son's hockey team, is quite impressive and demonstrates Neil's commitment to continuous learning and leadership development. We're excited to see Neil put theory into practice in our Parks and Recreation Department over the coming years ahead. Please join me in congratulating Neil. I'd also like to share some sad news today. Cowichan Elder Peter Williams recently passed away at 94 years of age. Mr. Williams was very well known in the community and was a big advocate for revitalizing the Hulkaminam language and taught many local people that language over the years. On behalf of council, I'd just like to offer my condolences to Mr. Williams' family on his passing. There's a few other things I'd like to cover in the mayor's report, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna make it a bit more concise. One point I wanted to highlight, as I mentioned in my opening comments, was today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. Earlier today, members of council attended the Salish Sea Solstice at Waterwheel Park in Chemainus to celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day. The event allowed us to collectively reflect on the dark history of the residential schools, including the Cooper Island Residential School, and all the pain and suffering that was caused. We also had a chance to enjoy the local Salish cuisine and artwork, as well as performances from Indigenous dancers and musicians, providing all of us with an opportunity to recognize the fundamental contributions that Indigenous people have made to the identity and culture of not just our community, but Canada as a whole. I'd like to thank Connie Crocker, Mark Kimley, and Kathy Walks from the Chemainus Valley Cultural Arts Society for all their important work in putting on this day of recognizing, remembering, and honoring the Penelakut tribe and First Nations more broadly across the Cowichan Valley. Earlier today, Council held a workshop just prior to this open meeting on how we want to approach the growing challenges related to homelessness, mental health, addictions, and street disorder that are having such a profound impact on our municipality. This workshop provided us with a chance to comprehensively explore various approaches to dealing with these issues and the implications of each, whether through new bylaws, increased staffing, security, RCMP, or advocacy to the province. Implementing any of these solutions will be complex, potentially costly, and requires partnerships with other levels of government and other jurisdictions, as well as the balancing between enforcement and advocacy. I'd like to share with everyone that we did pass a motion in this regard earlier today that I'm happy to report out on publicly. The motion that we passed was that staff be directed to bring forward a report outlining new service delivery options related to managing public disorder resulting from homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health issues in our community, including an open drug use bylaw, revised sidewalk and parks bylaw, nuisance enforcement bylaw, 24 staffing and deployment, a social planner, a clean team, nighttime security, coordination with other jurisdictions, more housing and social services, community safety office, housing detox and drug treatment facilities, marsh patrols, and community policing. The motion also directed staff to bring forward a report on targeted advocacy requests from provincial and federal governments related to improved health services for our region. So that was passed earlier today, and as I've relayed in previous council meetings, this is a top priority for our council, and anticipating that'll be coming back to us shortly. Again, a few other items I was hoping to update council on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to end the mayor's report at there, and happy to take any questions from members of council. All right. Moving on then. We'll now move on to delegations, and I'd like to start with the Environmental Education Program Student Awards and welcome Sarah Greaves, our engineering technologist, discuss on environmental programs to present the awards to local students who participated in the Environmental Education Program. Welcome, Ms. Greaves.
Hi everyone. So, hello Mayor, hello Council, hi kids. So yeah, I'm here to present the awards from this year's Environmental Education Program. Before we get into that, just a quick review of what this year's program actually entailed, because each year the theme changes. So the theme for this year was pollinators. We had almost 860 students participate this year, which is a much higher number than last year's program. I was lucky enough to be able to present this program in person, where in the year prior it had to be virtual due to COVID. So for the pollinator program, I taught the students about what types of the different types of animals that are pollinators, what pollination actually is, why pollinators are important to us, things that are harming pollinators currently, and the things that the students could do in their everyday life to help protect them. So there's a lot of interest in that. And then as the last part of the program, there's a contest that the students had an opportunity to participate in, where they were given a template of a postcard, and they had to pick their favorite pollinator and write a thank you postcard to that pollinator for a specific type of plant that pollinator helps with growing, and then stating an action that they would do to help protect that specific pollinator. So without further ado, there are 5 winners here tonight. And our first winner is in kindergarten, and her name is Brielle. Brielle, do you want to come up with me, and I will come with you to get your prize? You want to come on up? We'll come up this way. Okay. And our next winner in grade 1, we have Maria. Maria, do you want to come on up? Whatever works. Okay, good job, Maria. So for grade 2, we have Lila. Where's Lila? You want to come on up? Big cheese. Alrighty, and did that not work?
Sometimes it takes a minute.
Okay. Nope. Thank you. And for grade 3, we have Abby with the hummingbird postcard. The one behind, yep. Good job, Abby. And finally, in grade 5, we have Claire. Awesome. So, awesome job, everybody. It was so fun teaching you all, and you all did such a good job on your postcards. Now, can I get everybody to come back up and we'll take a big group picture all together? Come on up. Where do you want her to just stand? Just right in front of Mayor's desk. Okay, do you want the desk over there in the middle? There you go.
Get in there too. Yeah.
I'm right behind you, okay?
Congratulations to all the award winners and their families, and yeah, thank you, Ms. Greaves, for all your work and coordinating this program. Oh yeah, and to all the families who came to accept the awards, you don't have to stick around for the rest of the meeting, so if you want to take off, yeah. All right, I'd like to next welcome up our next delegation, Colin James. Colin will be presenting on behalf of the West Home Community Flood Action Group and will be providing a presentation to council regarding the consultant's report on the Lower Chemainus River Flood Action Plan, which again is going to follow, we've moved up from 11.1 to come immediately after public input. So I know, Mr. James, you're aware of the procedure for the delegation, so it's 10 minutes you'll have to present, but, you know, as much time as is needed for questions from council afterwards.
Okay.
All right.
Would Don be able to talk too, or are we just restricted to one person?
As part of your 10 minutes, he could be part of that. I mean, we can always, as long as there's unanimous support around the council table, we can always provide extra time as well, so we're not, but.
Okay.
Our general policy is 10 minutes, but if unanimously council supportive of it, we can definitely extend that time limit.
Thank you.
How about we'll see when we get close to the 10 minutes. If you still need time, we can always add on to that.
I'm about 10 minutes, so, and I don't want to take up time so he can't talk.
All right.
Okay?
Okay. Right now? Okay, we'll motion to waive the. All right. It's moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So when you're finished, Mr. James, you can welcome up Don, and then questions from council after that.
Okay.
All right.
I've been coming before council for over 40 years, and my message hasn't changed. That is something I share with NHC, the authors of the study that you will be presented with today, because this study is almost the same as the one done in the 1990s. Lots of ideas about dikes, houses on stilts, and how to spend millions and millions of dollars while acknowledging all these ideas are bad practice and provide no lasting, meaningful solutions. I understand it's not really good protocol to come before you and ask you questions, added to which I only get 10 minutes, so I don't have time to hear your answers. But I do have questions for you. Perhaps you could hear them and respond to them when you are considering this crisis, and those answers may help you to make good choices. Question 1. Do you believe that the Chemainus River should be governed in such a way that it is a productive and healthy ecosystem that will enable salmon to return to it and spawn? Because right now they can't. The river is plugged with logs, slash and debris, and choked with gravel and sediment, and the philosophy of allowing the river to just evolve and be in a constant state of flux has not worked. It is a failure. There are so few salmon returning that fisheries no longer bother to do a count. Question 2. Do you believe that good environmental practices should be the governing factor when creating policies around stewardship of the river? Because right now, that's not the case. The river is like a neglected and abused storm sewer. It is choked, its tributaries are choked, Bonsall Creek is choked, White House Creek is choked, its flood channels are choked. The entire river system has been allowed to totally degrade. Question 3. Do you believe in justice and equality, and that no one person or group of people are expendable or should be ignored over the needs of another group of people? Because right now, the municipal government, the provincial government, and the federal government can enter the river at any time of year in order to clear a blockage that may be causing a threat or endangering a piece or section of public infrastructure. Yet private landowners have no recourse. They are forbidden for entering the river to remove anything that may threaten their property. We have to watch helpless as the river tears at the banks and erodes the land and destroys our lives and everything we work for. Question 4. Do you believe that government has a right to design and build infrastructure such as roads to a height that may allow them to not have to close that road and interrupt the wheels of commerce, even though that raised road acts as a dam and worsens the problem for those who live in the floodplain? Because right now, I cannot do anything to my property that may negatively impact my neighbours. But government, I've lost a sheet. Hang on. Oh, there we go. But government do not have to consider the impact on our neighbourhood when making their decisions. Question 5. Do you believe that when considering the environment and the public right to enjoy that environment, decisions should reflect that the river, like clean air, forest trails and public green spaces and improving the quality of life are very important? Because right now, children can no longer dive into the deep pools on the west side of the railway bridge because the pools no longer exist. Because right now, young children can no longer swing out on a rope like the one that used to be tied to the trusses of the old wooden trestle bridge and then letting go and drop into the deep pools. The older, braver, or maybe foolhardy kids can no longer jump off the bridge itself like their parents did when they were kids, because there are no pools. Because right now, you might be lucky to see one person standing on the bridge with a fishing rod in their hand when the salmon are running. Whereas years ago, there would be dozens hanging their rods over both sides of the old bridge and children down splashing in the pools, just grabbing at the fish. Now there are no fish. Because right now, you can't go down to the river behind the old Billy Thomas homestead, climb the old tree trapped in the middle of the river, climb to the highest branch and leap into the deep pools. There's just a big mountain of gravel where those pools used to be. Do you believe that it would be wonderful to canoe the river with your children and see the beaver dams or watch on an otter slide down the bank into the river? Because right now you can't canoe the river. It's one long portage. And there are no beavers or otters anymore. Question 6. Do you believe that the forest industry in the upper watershed should continue to operate with impunity and in such a way that the landslides and erosion that devastate the delta should continue without redress? Because right now that is the case. And as the industry moves towards a model of cutting smaller and smaller trees and increases the frequency of cutting, hence creating a situation where the land has no time to recover, and landslides and erosion will get worse, and the flooding in the delta will get worse. And please review the Chemainus River Sediment Study, which was released just a few days ago. This community met to discuss the study before you today, and not just overwhelmingly, but unanimously rejected it. This community wants to see the gravel and the log jams removed and bank protection vigorously embarked on. It will not cost millions. It will provide the community with a valuable resource. The sediment study highlights the changes brought about by industry and development and acknowledges the degradation of the river. It also gives a brief history of the studies done and the resulting acknowledgement of governments to do something about it. But nothing has been done. Not one of those studies has resulted in remedial action or improved stewardship. The study paints a horrific picture of what can be expected as a result of climate change. Action to address the abysmal state of the river must begin now, or the delta will be destroyed and agriculture in this valley will be a thing of the past. The floodplain management plan provides no solutions and only provides ways to spend untold millions of dollars to achieve no positive outcomes while ignoring all their own good practices. Meanwhile, the sediment study graphically illustrates an ecologically disastrous past and a nightmarish future. And if we do nothing to stop that nightmare from happening, it will reflect on a shameful and morally bankrupt present. The entire river system in the Delta is completely and utterly broken. This has occurred predominantly because of unnatural pressures. So remedial action has to happen. Rewilding or allowing the river to continue in a state of flux is not natural evolution, it is willful devolution. We know that the municipality does not have funds to undertake the work that needs to be done. Those resources need to come from higher levels of government and from industry. There is a true cost or a real cost to everything, and that cost is far more than the price we pay for what we consume. Because the aftermath of resource extraction and manufacturing is brutally expensive. So yes, I believe that industry must play a role along with government, who have collected the royalties and the stumpage fees to come to the table and fund this work that has to be done. Please help us make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. We can either take questions from council now or invite Mr. Allingham to come up and present, and then you
Let's
can
get
answer
Mr.
together.
Allingham to make sure he gets to present his.
All right.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Don Allingham. I'm a farmer. I live on the Chemainus River. I've been there for 60 years. That whole time I've watched the river and its highs and lows, and I'm not talking just water height either. The river is getting worse with every flood. The water level is getting higher. It's coming up faster. It's doing more damage. The water's coming in the second bay of my barn. It's never done that in my 60 years I've lived there. What does that tell you? People in West Home have sandbags around their houses. They look like something out of a war movie. We got an evacuation alert last year from the RCMP. Day after, mind you, it flooded, but still it was an alert. We used to jump off the Chemainus River Bridge. You know the black bridge heading into Chemainus? There's a new one there now. It used to be a black one. We used to jump off that into pools that were 10, 12 feet deep. You know what's there now? A gravel bar. So I ask you, has the river level dropped 10 or 12 feet? I'll let you answer that. We used to be able to swim straight across that river from one bank to the other. The shallow side, 2, 4 feet deep. The deep side, 6, 7 feet deep. All summer long. Now that channel, 3 feet wide, 2 feet deep, or 2 inches deep, pardon me. That's the Chemainus River now. That just tells you what kind of shape the Chemainus River is in, as Colin said. So when the water levels get high in the river in the winter months, when the snow melts, where's the water going when that channel is full? In people's yards, people's basements, in my barn. It's getting worse every year. Worse every year. The powers to be talk about putting dikes up by the highway, the other side of the highway, from the highway down to the railroad bridge at a cost of $27 million. And that's not the whole river. They say they'll dike one side, they'll push 3 feet of water to the other person's property that's not diked. How'd you like to be that guy? They talk about their 200-year flood. I got an idea, let's just work on the yearly floods. I'll take the 200-year flood on the chin any day to stop the year in, year out floods and the damage it's doing to me and my neighbors. It's always going to flood. We live on a floodplain, but it's getting worse, and the damage is getting worse every year. They talk about the gravel removal between the two bridges, the highway bridge down to Chemainus River Road Bridge. That's great, don't get me wrong, anything's better than nothing. That's the most high visible, easy to get to job. Never talk about the mouth of the river, never. I don't know about you, I live in a rural area, I have a septic tank and a septic field, when my septic field's plugged, I don't pour Drano down my toilet. I had to say that on Colin, he hates when I say that. There's log jams at the mouth of the Chemainus River. If you have photos, you'll see them. The Chemainus River used to run out past Bear Point. You know Chemainus? Used to run straight out to Bear Point. Guess where it goes now? It goes out Swallowfield Farm. It's 3-4 miles away from it. It used to go out to the river. So my question is, what happens when that channel gets plugged? Where's the river going? It's going to go somewhere. And the fish. Remember the fish? We never talked about. I thought the whole world was about saving the fish and the food supply for the sea life, and everybody wants the fish. The returns are so low now. This is from the government. I'm talking, Colin can verify this. They don't even bother counting returns anymore in the Chemainus River. Don't even bother. I was down watching a couple of chum come up last fall. There's a big chum was high centered on a gravel bar, and the seagulls were starting to eat him. He wasn't dead. He wasn't on his side. He was upright, trying to swim up a gravel bar. And the few fish that do make it are in such shallow pools, predators of prey just pick them off. The pools are a couple feet deep. Like I mentioned before, back in the day, the Chemainus River used to flow straight across in the summer months. I'm sure you've all seen the river now. Colin and myself, we put a meeting together this spring at the Crofton seniors down by the ferry dock there, a little hall there. We had 50 people from the West Don Valley show up. And the unanimous result was river channel management. Manage the channel. It's going to flood. Let's lessen the severity of it. Bring the river back to what it used to be, a flourishing river that had fish. People could swim in it now. You're lucky if you take your kids down there and wade in the pools that we used to swim in. It's pretty disturbing. Next time you drive over the Chemainus River Bridge, I know y'all, the one I talk about on Chemainus Road. I live just around the corner of it. Do me a favor, will you? Look down the bridge and look at the water in the river. And you tell me if that's a healthy river. And when you look down there, you'll see the gravel that we've talked about. That's the tip of the iceberg, you guys. The tip. Like Colin said, the mouth is choked. All up and down where I live, up where Collins live, the whole river is choked with gravel. And what are we doing about it? Well, we'll hire a consultant, we'll do studies. It's frustrating for me and Colin. We're farmers, we have other things we could be doing. We don't get paid to come to these things. We're doing it because we're trying to look after our livelihood. So I would hope that we could put our heads together, put our egos aside, put our heads together and our resources, and fix the river from the mouth of the river all the way to the top. Bring it back to a flourishing river like it used to be. That's what I'm hoping can get done sometime. To bring the river back to its beauty it used to be. And if nothing gets done, which hasn't been done for quite a few years, in a couple of years we have to change the name of the Chemainus River. It's going to be a Chemainus drainage ditch. Thanks for this time, you guys.
Thank you, Mr.
Any
Ryan.
questions? Or we get questions later?
I wanted to ask if Mr. James could come up to the podium with you, so if council has any questions, we could direct him to both of you at the same time. And I've got Councillor Manas with a question right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. James and Mr. Ellingham, for your presentations. I know a number of us went and saw you guys last October with 4 or 5 other farmers
Yes?
and property owners there at Mr. James's property. And at that time, your concern was, again, gravel and debris. And then in December or January, when we had the latest floods there on the bridge there, myself, Councillor Callio and Councillor Finley decided to take a look out there, and you happened to drive by and stop by,
Yes.
and we chatted. And again, it was all about the debris. He showed us the debris, the gravel. We used to do gravel extraction many, many years ago on a regular basis,
Yes,
I do
it was.
believe. And we didn't have these issues before when that was done. So I would like to see myself as I don't have a question, but just a comment that we act upon the gravel extraction ASAP to save the river. I know we try to save other rivers, try to save other waterways and stuff, but I think this is very, very important for the residents, for the people that make a living off those lands. You know, I think we have the Bonsall Creek Reserve. We can use money from the, maybe transfer the money from the Bonsall Creek Reserve if we can, to try to put towards that. We can also sell some gravel, I do believe, to recoup some of our costs. I just think that something has to be done ASAP for this. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a renewable resource there. They take it out. Caps Brothers, Beggs Brothers took it out. The Holman boys used to take it up top. Guess what? Comes back in a couple years. So you can always use it for something. You got a hospital going up. You got a police station. You got a high school. Oh no, the high school already getting Cowichan River gravel. So why not our gravel?
To Mr. Conway, maybe, why have we stopped doing debris removal and gravel removal in the last little while?
I just asked Mr. Conway to jump in. He's got some news for council, but Mr. Conway, you can perhaps provide some clarification on this. So my understanding has always been that we can advocate, but ultimately it's federal, provincial government. We need to action this immediate gravel removal.
Yes, we do need provincial approval for gravel removal, and the last time that was done was in 2007. And that work was undertaken with North Cowichan obtaining approvals, and through the Halalt, the gravel was removed. There wasn't an appetite to do that in late 2016 because it wasn't deemed a comprehensive enough program. So it didn't occur at that time. But I am cautiously pleased to let council know tonight that the province is moving forward with the gravel removal program expected to occur this summer in the area downstream of the railway bridge. And I'll have more information for an upcoming meeting.
Mr. Conway, we just received that news today. I guess they knew Mr. Allingham and Mr. James were coming to council. Is that correct? We just received that.
That was just earlier today.
Yeah.
That, you know, like I said in my thing, that the river's not what she used to be. There was pools. I don't know if any of you are originally from the area, long timers. There was pools in the river. Like I said, the bridge we jumped off. You've seen it. It's pretty sad, isn't it? And come down to ground zero. Ministry of Environment flies up and down in helicopters, and they look out the windows, and they circle my place, and I see them go up and down the river. None of them have stepped foot on my place to look at the gravel. They spent $1 million doing all this stuff.
Councillor Callio, did you have a question? Then I'm going to go to
Yes.
Councillor Stash.
No, just a comment, and I agree with Mr. Ellington, is that when I was younger, we used to go down there and jump off the bridge and swim across, and it's, personally, I didn't recognize it down there when I went down there. It doesn't look anything the same as when I was down there, because it's been a long time since I've been down there, so, yeah. And like I say, it doesn't look the same to me.
Let's do something.
Councillor Stash.
I wanna ask him.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question comes to the important point that was brought up is, this is all within our area that we can work on and do the gravel removal. I've climbed Mount Whymper, Mount Landale, spent time at Shirk Lake. This is where all this water comes from, and I've been through all that mosaic forest tenure through there. So what avenues that our speakers have brought up of, what's the municipality's avenue to put more pressure, or, you know, to look at how that watershed's being treated, especially all the slopes of right down to the river edge, the forests don't exist anymore. Through even buffer zones to that. So then we're getting these higher peak volumes coming. So what's our avenue for, you know, is that through to the Minister of Forest, or is it the environment that we reach out to? And I'm sure they're well aware of this, but I think it's important to bring it up again.
Yeah, but I'll turn to Mr. Allingham and Mr. James to get their thoughts on it. But my thinking is that you might start with advocating to Mosaic forest management regarding concerns around forest practices, and then of course also going to the Ministry of Forests, which holds responsibility for the regulations around the logging on the private managed forest lands.
Mr. Mayor, just a reminder that at UBCM, it's one of the topics that we were hoping to talk to the ministers about is the Chemainus River.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, we have, we've requested at the Union of BC Municipalities. So Mr. James Allingham, every year, all the municipalities across BC meet at this convention, and we get a chance for meetings with the ministers to advocate on various issues. And we've identified kind of the three priority meetings that we want with the ministers, and one of them is with the Minister of Climate Change Emergency Readiness to discuss the issues with flooding in the Chemainus River, and obviously discuss prioritizing the gravel sediment and debris removal. We've also requested a separate meeting outside of that venue, hopefully a longer meeting with the Minister of Forests to voice these concerns as well.
I think that's what I'd like to see, that the council try to put together a meeting with the Minister of Forests and with our local MLA, and we need to make sure. Right now, Emergency BC is working with Mr. Conway, I know, and council, and that's a reactive thing. That's all about, you know, trying to find ways of sort of helping people deal with the flood. But it's not doing anything to try and prevent the stuff from happening. And so if Emergency BC is prepared to put money into a pot to do work, let's try and coordinate that with the Minister of Forests and our local MLA to make sure that we can get something more lasting done.
That's a great point, Mr. James, and I discussed it with an Nanaimo North Cowichan MLA and hoping to bring him out to your property so you can show them what you showed myself and others around council, just with both you're dealing with, and you know, to show the just that gravel and log jam buildup in the Chemainus River, which, as you pointed out, Mr. Allingham, is unrecognizable to what it was a few decades ago.
Yeah,
Councillor Toporowski, and then Councillor Justice. Mr. Allingham? Not to cut you off.
Just kind of, you know, forest management, upper watershed, that's not my field of expertise. I admit the damage is down below. You know, you can slap their hands, you can put fines on them, blah, blah, blah. The damage is done. There's always been gravel coming down. There's always been logs coming down the river. But we've managed it before. Managed it. We don't manage anything anymore. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. Thank you.
Mr. James, I can tell you're ready to say something.
We may have managed it in the pub, it's going to get worse. The sediment report highlights the fact that with climate change, things are only going to get worse in the like, we've always been aware that there's going to be tidal rise. That's something that everyone talks about when they're discussing climate change. But in the sediment report, they talk about other things that are happening, that are going to happen in the upper watershed as a result of climate change. And that's going to create, like, just in, you know, the entire province is on fire right now. And if we get wildfires up in Copper Canyon or up in that watershed, that'll exacerbate the problem that we're already facing now. It'll make it even worse. The ability for that land to retain water, the ability for that land to sort of to soak up any water will be completely negated. And the fact that they're going to start logging more frequently, they're going to be going in there and back out, and they'll be replanting and they'll be going in there again in 15, 25 years. They're taking out poles that are 4 inches in diameter at the end. You know, whereas when I first moved to this community in 1980, the logging trucks went by and they'd have 3 logs on them. 3 logs, 5 foot at the butt. And now we're going by, they've got 100 logs on there and they're 6 inches. And they're going to, the logging frequency will happen, and every time they go in there, there's be no recovery. So what we managed in the past is we're not gonna be able to manage it in the future. So something has to be done to stop it from happening. And it's no good building a dike just for the river to fill up with gravel again. And we'll be back here, we'll be wanting gravel removal, and they'll say, we spent 20 million on dikes. Now you want dredging done again. But we have to stop that gravel from coming down. We have to armor banks. We have to protect the areas where the land is eroded. Those logging roads up there, they're like conduits. They're like canals. When the rain hits, it comes down those logging roads. It's like a myriad of creeks up there. The water is rushing down those logging roads and coming down to the delta. And what we managed in the past, we will not be able to manage in the future.
Mr. James, you referred to the sediment study. So we've got the floodplain management plan, and then earlier we reviewed the flood mapping report as well. Is that sediment study, is that one of the appendices for the?
I'm sorry, can you?
Just, you referred to the sediment study, and like we've got the flood mapping report, the initial phase of the
There's a sediment
project.
study that's now been completed, and it's only been completed. I think Jeff can talk to that because he's received it in the last few days, and he gave me a copy of it.
Okay, I think Mr. Conway has ready to jump in on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to repeat that we received a sediment study just a few days ago that was performed by the province through the Ministry of Forests, although the CVRD and North Cowichan helped finance some of the background work for it.
And if you doubt any of the things I said in my presentation, anything about what's happening, they repeat it all in that sediment study. It's all there. This is not just me crying the blues because I happen to live on the delta. It's all in that study.
Councillor Toporowski.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak to us today. I did see you at the CVRD last week, I think it was.
I'm sorry, I'm deaf as a post, so if
Oh,
you could
okay.
speak up a little, it would help. Thank you.
Remember seeing you at the CVRD last week,
Right.
Cowichan Valley Regional District? Yeah. So thank you for coming to speak to us today. And yeah, it's just something that is really frustrating. You know, Cowichan Tribes has been talking about this for over 100 years with the Cowichan River, and Chemainus River is no different. It's a natural beast, and it ebbs and it flows. And even where my house is in Chemainus, like you had mentioned, the diversion of water is so far away from where it used to go naturally to Bear Point.
Yep.
And trying to plant something in the gravelly, you know, making a garden out of that is a challenge. Anyway, but we knew it was like a creek bed, right? And anyway, so that's just some of the things that are very frustrating. I sat on the fishing committee at Cowichan Tribes. We talked about gravel extraction, debris, and yes, we have to go after the source of where this is coming from. And that was a discussion at the Cowichan Valley Regional District 2, bringing a motion forward to the UBCM and asking, you know, and exploring those, but also having the meetings with the ministers to see if there's something that we could bring forward to have that funding, to have those extractions done for the gravel removal. And yes, you can sell the gravel for what? I can't remember what it was for a truckload, but I know it can be used in other areas. The fish and Chemainus, like you had mentioned, I went there, and when they were spawning, went to Chemainus Road Bridge. Then we drove up to the Green Bridge to see if any of them made it past. And you see maybe one or two.
Exactly.
You've seen something, right? And like you had mentioned, most of them were spawning before they even got to the Chemainus Bridge. And I've never seen that before.
Yep.
So, and there was nothing past, and it's just a lot of gravel buildup. Again, not, you know, pointing fingers at anybody of this cause of this, but I mean, there are things that we need to work together to come up with solutions and whatnot. So I know with Cowichan Tribes, what we learned was we had to get hard data, which takes time to gather. And I do see a light at the end of the tunnel of our staff working on things together with the nations in the area, and looking at you know, DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and getting that permission from the provincial government. Sometimes it just never happened to, you know, both of them agree at the same time. But now that there's more awareness of trying to figure out this climate mitigation and all those things that you had mentioned, the sea level rising, and also having to deal with what we have to do, what's happening up on the hill. And we have to talk to the governments about how do we get to regulate this, because it's affecting our local areas. Those are private lands. We don't have a say, but we should have a say because something's being affected down below.
I have private lands, but I'm not allowed to do what I want without, if it has a serious impact on the people who live around me or downstream from me, I'm not allowed to do it. Mm-hmm. So private lands or public lands, it's really irrelevant.
I guess I should say crown land.
Well,
Yes.
I'm just saying that, you know, Mosaic may be logging private land, but if it's decimating everybody in the Delta.
But this gravel is coming down before Mosaic. M&B days, there was this gravel and log jams. This isn't just yesterday's project or yesterday's disaster. This has been like for years. It happens every year because it's a floodplain. But we take gravel off. They'd harvest the gravel. I remember as kids, we'd go down with our mom and dad and local farmers. We would scope out the log jams for the cedars to make cedar fence posts. Then we'd cut up the rest of the log jam a little bit and it would float away next flood. Nobody does anything anymore. We just all sit back and yep, something's bad happening.
Well, I do see a glimmer of hope with our staff and the council that are sitting here today. We try to work on solutions of what we can do in our jurisdiction, and then advocate to the higher ups on what can we do better. So just wanted to share that with you, and thank you again.
Thank you. Hope we can get something done to the old river because, like I say, and you know, might be kind of crude calling it a drainage ditch, but that's the rate it's going.
Councilor Justice.
That's so sad it is.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with a lot of what Councillor Toporowski just said, especially, I guess, the sort of feeling of optimism. And I hope you feel a bit optimistic that at least, I think, you know, probably all of us and probably all of the CVRD board members and our staff are all sort of united in sort of seeing this as a problematic river that needs to be dealt with. I mean, I think that the whole river is a problem, and we need to work on a restoration of the whole river, from the headwaters to the transition zone to the deposition zone. I think we've, whether gravel's always been coming down is one question, but is there more gravel coming down now as a result of land use practices, probably short-sighted, misguided land use practices, as well as climate change. So, yeah, I think we're all sort of on the same program. It's really just about sort of, the how. And what I'd like to ask you, though, is about sort of like where your sort of major focus is. And you spoke about a meeting of a bunch of like-minded and similarly experienced people, and you said you came up with one answer, which was water channel management. And my question is, when you say water channel management, do you feel like you mean something that's different than the sort of gravel removal that we're talking about now?
We're talking about the removal of gravel and debris and trying to get the rivers and the creeks back into a healthy, state. Norm Quest has lost 40 acres of land. He hasn't lost it, didn't disappear, it's still there, but it's not draining. The water doesn't go off of it, so he can't get on it. It's 40 acres of land that his family has farmed for 100 years, and he can't get on there anymore. Now that's, it's not because there's floodwater on the land. It's just the land doesn't drain because Bonsall Creek, White House Creek, Barkley Creek, all those creeks don't drain. They're plugged. So the water doesn't get away.
I have bank erosion. I'm losing 10, 20 feet every year. Pulling trees in now with it.
And I think that the problem is clear. Maybe not the sort of details that you're providing, but
Yeah.
I mean, we sort of understand that it's flooding more often, that there's gravel where pools used to be, that there's been an impact on the salmon and other wildlife. They've become scarce. I mean, I think the problem is clear, but it's.
There is, we say remove the gravel from the two gravel bars, between the two bridges. Is that gonna bring back the pools downstream?
Yeah. So I guess that's what I wanted to know was
You know?
whether if we're, if the sort of gravel removal is being proposed and thought about is the sort of, is going to be satisfying in terms of what you mean by water channel management. But
No, I think it's big. I don't want to look at it as we've got this problem with this gravel bar or that gravel bar. We're going to take it out. There's a philosophical and ideological divide between the people that control what happens in the river and the people who live on the river and the people who see the river deteriorating. There's a move to rewild and to allow things to happen naturally. And I'm all for that if what's being manifested or foisted on the river was natural, but it's not. What's happening to the river is a result of unnatural events, such as logging all that's unnatural. It's not. So how can you, as the Department of Fisheries, or how can you turn around and say, we don't want to remove blockages, we don't want to remove gravel, because we don't want to create an increased velocity in the river. We don't want to, we like bends in the river, we like the river to move around and create back eddies. It's all good for salmon enhancement. But that's a lie. They say it's good for salmon enhancement, but where are the salmon? They've been following that philosophy and ideology for 40 years. And it's not working. The salmon aren't coming back. So it's not true. The river is spreading out too. It's not so channelized. So it's spreading out and the water gets warmer. And the fish don't like the water either, the warm water. It's like the whole thing is falling to pieces. And so, funding is a problem. We need to get funding to help us to do the work that needs to be done. But we also have to change that philosophy of just letting the river be. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for any of us. That doesn't mean to say that we should, build a concrete wall on each side of the river and keep it as straight as possible and, have an unbelievable velocity that's sort of barreling down some conduit. That's not what we're saying, but it's like, it can't go on the way it is. So we have to try and find a way to fund the work that needs to be done. And we have to change the philosophy and ideology of the powers that be that control what happens in the river.
All right, thank you. You've helped me understand the complexity of the problem a little bit more deeply.
Any other questions from council? Just one point I wanted to clarify, Mr. Allingham and Mr. James. I mentioned earlier on that we've requested meetings with the appropriate ministers. We've requested meetings with the Minister of Climate Change and Emergency.
Readiness.
Yeah, the new ministry, you know what I'm talking about. And then
Yes.
also the Ministry of Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship. So I thought it had been the Minister of Forests. It's those other two ministries we started with, but based on those discussions, we can definitely follow up with the Minister of Forests if we want to prioritize, some action on the logging practices on the private managed forest lands.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks guys, and just hope something gets done to the river because it's pretty sad.
would comment on your statement that, am I feeling optimistic? This is probably the best hearing we've ever had in the 40 years that I've been doing this. So I do have a slight degree of optimism, but my problem is I'm getting really old and I just want it to happen before I die. So thank you very much for your time and thank you for your interest and your questions.
Thank you, Mr. James and
Can
Mr.
I just
Allingham.
thank Jeff, because we always seem to be attacking the
Yeah.
work that he's facilitating and he has been so helpful to us. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
He's a good guy.
All right, council, that concludes our delegations. We can now move on to public input on agenda items. We have 2 individuals signed up for the in-person public input, and I'm first going to turn to the IT staff and just ask if you can walk us through on the screen the process for those who may want to participate virtually.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Can we get some heat in here? Can we get some heat in here?
Some heat?
Heat.
I believe that's a point of privilege.
Okay, all right. Okay.
There are 3 ways to join the speakers list. On the desktop or web, you can click the raise hand button. On the mobile app, press the 3 dots, then raise hand. By telephone, press the *3 to raise or lower hand.
Thank you. I'll start with the folks who are in the gallery. I've got 2 speakers here. The first is Joyce Benson. Ms. Benson, if you could come up to the podium and state your name and address.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Joyce Benson, Drinkwater Road. Thank you, gentlemen. Good job. Okay, I'm speaking to 2.24, Cowichan Estuary Restoration. As we just heard from 2 local farmers representing many, input is needed from locals for real solutions after many years. When and where was public consultation with property owners being affected by this plan of the Cowichan Estuary Restoration? You'll be receiving a letter on it today. And a bigger issue, so that's my first point. When and where was public consultation with property owners being affected by this plan? And a bigger issue is a bigger issue than removing farmers' crops and potentially flooding properties west of the estuary is for CVRD North Cowichan, City of Duncan, Cowichan Tribes to remove or replace the Cowichan River sewage outfall, which has been depositing into Cowichan Bay, negatively affecting not only Cowichan Bay general, but the sea life for many years. This may follow along with some of what we've just heard today. Some of the planning that happens without consultation with local people, where the real resource of knowledge and experience and also impact on properties are being directly affected, and sadly in their case for too many years. So those are my comments to do with the Cowichan Estuary Restoration. When and where public consultation and the sewage outfall continuing to go into Cowichan Bay is the bigger real issue than building another berm and removing a dike that's been there for since 1940 in a bird sanctuary and with farmers' crops being impacted negatively. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the next speaker, Adriana Richards. Ms. Richards, if you could state your name and address.
Hi, it's Adriana, and I'm on Fairview Way. I had a bunch of stuff here, but I realized you guys just went and had, an hour or 2 talking about what's the bylaws and things that you're looking at. So I'm not going to preach to the choir. I'm sure you know all the money and everything else that's being used. But so since the motion today is to direct it to staff, I'd actually like to direct my statements to staff. And I know that you know where the other bylaws are coming from and other places like Kamloops and places like that are doing the bylaws. So to me, I just want to say that with my research, I did find the Campbell River, that council that backed out, reason being is they were a bit intimidated by the threats of a lawsuit. And I would like to address staff and hope that you don't bow down to these people. They're the Pivot Legal Society and the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users. And I would urge you to go to their website, the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users, on their first page, and you will see their policies and their intimidation tactics towards local governments. So it's really important to me. Their lawyer said things like criminalizing public drug use will not stop people from using drugs, which of course we all agree. And fines will no way stop drug use, and most likely they'll never be paid either. But it's just a minor tool for our bylaw, now that we have to spend more municipal taxes on these bylaw officers. So, and we know that the bylaw officers will definitely use, their discretion and be able to use this around our children and our schools. So I'm hoping that if there's any more, as you can tell, like Kamloops is doing a different one. They're just doing around public parks. Penticton's doing the entire all over bylaw. So I would just hope that that staff is able to look into that and not be intimidated by these people that come in and try to shut this down. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll now turn to IT staff and ask if there are any virtual attendees with their hands raised.
There is not.
All right, thank you. We can now move on through the agenda to bylaws. Bylaw 7.1, over to you, Ms. Martin.
Mr. Mayor, you were moving up 11.1.
I'm jumping back and forth between the original and the revised agenda. Give me a second here to get sorted out. All right, okay. Item 11.1. So we're moving now to item 11.1, which is the Chemainus River Floodplain Management Study. So I'm not sure if that's, Mr. Moore, you're going to kick this off from the Cowichan Valley Regional District. Welcome, Mr. Moore.
Great. Thank you to Mayor and all the councillors for inviting me to be here tonight. I'm following, you've heard a lot obviously tonight from Mr. James and Mr. Allingham about the issues in the lower Chemainus watershed. I'm bringing the plan that they talked about that Northwest Hydraulic Consultants prepared for us. So I'm here to present that. So. This project was a partnership between the CVRD, North Cowichan, Halalt, and Penelakut, the Tussey Road Reserves part of Penelakut tribe. It basically started after the flood on the Chemainus River in 2020. After that, a number of groups came together trying to look at the issues in the Chemainus, and the action that the CVRD was the lead on was this long-term flood management plan. So we got funding from the National Disaster Mitigation Program, which is federal and provincial funding, and in addition, CVRD and North Cowichan contributed some funding for this. The study area that we looked at, just so you're familiar with it, is the lower Chemainus. So it includes the lower portion of the Chemainus watershed from just upstream of the highway bridge, and also includes White House Creek and Bonsall Creek, because the bottom parts of those floodplains are all conjoined. The floodwaters all spill over and mix together. Within that, there's a fair bit of municipal land. There's also almost the entire Halalt First Nation Reserve is within that land, as well as the Tussey Reserve. There's also a couple of reserves from the Chemainus First Nation that are within the study area there. This project had a couple of phases. The project began with flood mapping. That had previously been done in 1990, so a lot of things were out of date from that. The technologies involved in terms of computer modeling, the standards from the province have evolved since then, as well as climate change, and our understanding of what the future climate conditions are going to look like have changed quite a bit. So what we did is Northwest Hydraulic Consultants, they used LiDAR to build a really detailed model of the lower portion of the floodplain. Then they built a hydraulic model, so they basically run water across that model, and they can tell where the flood, the extent of the flooding is and the velocities of the water. So that was wrapped up last spring, and then was presented to the community, to various stakeholders, and then we started looking for some solutions to the problems that once we had an understanding of the problem. So that first phase, the flood mapping, this is where it's important to understand that following the guidelines from engineers and geoscientists BC for flood mapping in BC, we look at the 1 in 200 year flood. So essentially a worst case scenario. So for this project, all the mapping is to take into account a 1 in 200 year design flood. And we're looking at that for the year 2100. So it includes increased precipitation from climate change, as well as sea level rise at the other end. So both those impacts to that. And what came out of this is a series of maps. So we've got flood hazard maps, floodplain maps, and also we did some geomorphic hazard mapping. So these are the products that we got. This is a flood hazard map. So basically the different colors show how deep the flood waters are going to be, and the arrows show how fast the waters are going to be moving. So the deeper and faster moving the water, the greater the hazard there, the more damage it can do to life and to property. The other piece is the designated floodplain maps. So again, this is an example of one, and the lines on the map show the flood construction levels. So this is for future planning. If you want to make sure that what you're building is going to be safe from future flooding, you build to that level. And as I said, then we took these products out to the community, had a series of public meetings, had them online on the Plan Your Cowichan platform, and got a lot of ideas from the local residents. We heard a lot of the same messages that we heard from Mr. James and Mr. Allingham tonight about the urgency of the problem and the need to do something now. And that's not necessarily the focus of this longer term plan, but it's a really key message that was heard. And we also asked for ideas of how to fix the problem. So the next step was to come up with a series of floodplain management strategies. So NHC came up with these strategies in 4 broad categories. So land use management, emergency preparedness and response, flood proofing, and then the last one is a structural mitigation. And this is what everyone thinks of when they think of flood proofing. This is doing something to control the floodwaters. So dikes or flood channels or flood walls, all these different kinds of things. With these structural ones, NHC looked at 5 different concepts. So these are just high-level concepts. They're not detailed plans. They're just big picture. If we did this, what would be the impact across the floodplain? So the ones they looked at are shown here. To orient you a little bit, you can see the highway running north-south, sort of along the left portion there. And then the dotted line follows the Chemainus River. So number 1 on that map is that they considered was a dike upstream of the Chemainus River. So basically, during a flood, a lot of the water spills out upstream of the highway, goes through Russell Farms and the fish hatchery, and then eventually comes across the highway. So a dike upstream of the highway on the south bank to protect against that. The second one that goes along with that is continuing the dike from the highway bridge. That's number 2 on the map. The green line goes along, intersects the rail line, and then continues on to the Chemainus Road Bridge, again, all along the south side of the river. The third one, the dotted line towards the bottom of the map, is the removal of the ENN rail line. During the flood, some floodwaters are trapped on the Halalt side of the rail line, and the floodwaters are different or lower on the other side, so that would affect the timing of the flood as well. The fourth one was ring dikes around some of the communities, so the orange crosshatched areas around Halalt, around Tussey Road, it looks like around some of the more densely populated areas on the other side of the highway around Russell Farms and up Mount Sicker. And then the final one was looking at the channel management, so clearing out gravel and debris along a section of the river. So for each of these structural ones, NHC used their hydraulic model to see what the impacts of that would be. So this is an example with the 2 dikes in place. And if you look on the left-hand picture there, you can see, well, a lot of the areas south of the river would be dry now. So Russell Farms would stay dry, Halalt would stay dry. There'd still be some limited flooding just along White House and Bonsall. But the other piece of the picture is on the right-hand side, comparing the scenario with or without the dikes. The blue represents areas where the water depth has gone down, whereas the red indicates areas where the water depth would go up. So as Mr. Allingham pointed out, putting dikes along the south side of the river, obviously that water has to go somewhere. So this would transfer all that flood risk to the residents on the other side of the river. So those structural options, along with all the other options, were evaluated in a number of ways. So one of them right off the bat is that no adverse impact. So you're not making things worse for some people by making things better for other parts of the floodplain. And then they looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, got stakeholder and public input. This is where Mr. James and Mr. Allingham took these options out to organize their own community meeting, got all this feedback, which was incredibly helpful. And then they also looked at some costs and stuff. So just to be clear, this report is recommending against any sort of dikes. They transfer the risk as well. The dikes would be between 3 and 5 meters high the whole way along the river, and cost estimates are $24 million, give or take. So it's not being recommended as a solution. It's presented in the report. You know, it was an option. It might work. It's something that's used other places. In this case, it's not an option that should be considered any further. So NHC did come up with 5 recommended options to move forward with. Land use management, so this is using the floodplain mapping for flood hazard bylaws, making sure that future development is done in places that are safe or to an elevation that's safe, putting requirements along with subdivision in terms of engineering reports or covenants. There's lots of land use tools that can be used, which is great for the future. Emergency response, so this is things to try to lessen the impacts of the flood. It's not going to stop the floodwaters, but it's going to make the community more prepared and resilient to it. And it can include things like better warning systems so that people have a little more time to prepare to evacuate if necessary. The next couple are flood-proofing ones. So permanent flood-proofing, so raising houses basically, or in some situations ring dikes. And this is something that's moving forward on Halalt with Indigenous Services Canada. There's also temporary flood-proofing options. As was mentioned, if you drive through Halalt, you'll see the Heshko blocks and sandbags around some houses. So those are temporary, but in some cases they're in place for years. And there's other ones such as these tiger dams and aqua fences and other things that can be deployed relatively quickly if there's some warning that a flood's coming. There are limits to these. They can only withstand a certain depth and velocity of floodwaters, so a lot of parts of the floodplain, they wouldn't be able to withstand the 1 in 200 year flood. And then the only structural one that's recommended is this channel management. So this is getting a better understanding of what the obstructions are and what the best ways are to remove those. And it's both the immediate need to get in there and try and deal with the threat that the residents are experiencing every single year, but it's also a longer term plan for understanding how much gravel is coming down, where is it accumulating, how often would it need to be removed, and are there better options for preventing it being transported downstream, things that can be done in the upper watershed there. The other thing to really keep in mind with this, and why it doesn't score higher in the report, is because this is focused on the 1 in 200 year flood. So when the floodwaters fill the entire valley from side to side, then removing some gravel from the one channel isn't going to make a huge impact overall. in the 1 in 200 year flood. Where there is some potential benefit that isn't really the focus of this report is in the more frequent floods. So in the 1 in 10 year flood, for example, making the channel that much able to carry more water could have a bigger impact. So we might not see Pinson's Corners flooding every year and the farmers getting these impacts year after year, and that constant threat. Keeping in mind that it's not going to fix the big 1 in 200 year flood threat. So to summarize things, NHC's recommendations were adopt a mix of flood mitigation strategies, primarily non-structural. So we talked about the land use, emergency preparedness, flood proofing, and the channel management. And then some other recommendations that went forward to the CVRD board were to use the hydraulic model that NHC created. CVRD owns that, so use that to model these the effects of channel management on the smaller floods, so that we can show what those benefits are, and then that's something that can support the application to the province for permission to do that for the impacts within a stream. Also working more closely with North Cowichan staff, with Halalt and the province to look at watershed planning for the whole watershed, recognizing that we're seeing the problems down at the bottom, but it's the entire watershed that are contributing to the problem. And then going out and presenting these results to the community as well. There's my contact information, and happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Moore. I got a question from Councillor Justice, and then Councillor Finlay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you, Mr. Moore. I did see this presentation at the CVRD, and I must say the second time I've got quite a bit more out of it, so I'm a bit of a slow learner, I guess. The last recommendation in the report is to initiate both technical and environmental studies to prepare a long-term gravel or channel management program that would, I guess, amongst other things, identify the most critical sites for gravel removal, but also assess habitat impacts. Now, the delegation that was just speaking to us, they were concerned that proper gravel and channel management might be impossible given environmental sensitivities, or really what they were talking about was a sort of a philosophy of letting the river do what it would naturally do. Do you see that as a realistic concern, that sort of philosophy of letting rivers go back to meandering and so on, and environmental concerns might actually limit our ability to get that channel management done the way that it needs to be done?
Yeah. In a lot of cases in the lower floodplain, the river is already constrained. We've got properties on both sides of the river. We can't let it use the full extent of the floodplain that it could historically used. As it filled in the channel with gravel, and the river would move and use other parts of the floodplain. So we're already dealing with a drastically altered and constrained system. I mean, within that, I think there's a desire and an increasing recognition within the community of practice for restoration to try to look at methods that mimic natural systems as closely as possible, and take into account multiple values. So if you are taking out gravel, making sure it's done in a way that's going to, at the right time, and you're still enabling lots of habitat to be either enhanced or accessed by the fish at different times of the year.
So can I summarize it by saying you think that it's not a sort of, there's a compromise or a solution to that conundrum?
Yeah, and I think we can even look to the Cowichan, where there's gravel removal going on every year or two there, and the locations where it's being done and the way it's being done takes the fishery into account again in a system that's constrained within a dike system there.
Great, thanks. I have one more question, but maybe somebody else wants to go.
Okay, a follow-up, and then Councillor Finlay.
Right, sir, thank you. So the report also notes that and you've sort of reiterated that the long-term flood management has to include an entire watershed approach. And the report also notes that staff are working on an expanded MOU, potentially led by Halalt Nation, to look at the upper watershed, or at least the entire watershed, I guess. So, but I wonder, could you describe what is known about land use changes in the upper watershed that have occurred in past decades, and their effect on flooding, low water levels in the summer, and rate of gravel deposition? I mean, are those things sort of proven to be connected? Would it stand up in court? I mean, are the effects of land use in the upper river clearly determined on what's happening in the lower river?
Through the chair to Councillor Justice, I think it's a really difficult question how clearly to what level of proof there can be connecting disturbances directly to any given impact. There's been some discussion around the sediment study that was just released by the Ministry of Forests, and it looks at landslide rates and sediment sources in the upper watershed. One of the points they make is that the landslide rate is 5 times what would be expected for an undisturbed watershed. So there's certainly appears to be some sort of impact from that. I think there's growing recognition that there's lots of relationship between the land cover and how quickly the water moves off the landscape. There's no questions about that. You can get into all kinds of details about the age of the forest and how much water it absorbs and how that affects drought levels in the summer and stuff. So there's lots of arguments. But I think the big picture is that there's been decades of disturbance. That sediment study went back and looked at historical records where they could find them to try to get a sense of the records of disturbance over time. Halalt has been leading a number of projects, both in the lower watershed, looking at habitat there. They're also looking to do a bigger habitat analysis in the upper watershed. So a lot of different pieces of getting a bigger understanding of how the watershed is currently functioning. And another piece of the picture that NHC did was look at the changing hydrology in the watershed. So that it's part of coming up with, okay, our design flood is a 1 in 200 year flood. Well, how much water is that? So they look at historical records and the trends in how the peak flows have been increasing more recently, and then trying to project how climate change is going to increase that as well. So there's a look at the trends incorporated in a bunch of different pieces of the picture. I don't think it's all in one place yet.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Councillor Finlay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This may be more a question, Mr. Conway, than you, Mr. Moore, but I'm curious about the scope of the gravel removal, if we know that yet, where it starts, where it ends. And the second question, part of that question, I guess, would be if there is value to that gravel, and if the gravel removal will offset some of our costs to remove it.
Thank you for the question. We are meeting later this week with the province and some of the residents, as well as Halalt, to have a look at the area for removal. Generally speaking, it would be between the railway bridge and just upstream of the Chemainus Road Bridge, where the river already narrows because of a rock shelf outcrop into the river. It's seeming at this moment that the gravel will be used through the Halalt primarily for raising houses and perhaps some more temporary diking, but that hasn't been confirmed.
Any other Councillor Calia?
Just a very quick one, Mr. Moore. The floods that we had in February 2020 and November 21, you talk about the 1 in 200 year flood. In what category were those two floods compared to the 1 in 200 year flood?
Through the chair, they were about between a 1 in 50 and 1 in 75 year flood. They were on the order of 700 to 750 cubic meters per second of flow, and the 1 in 200 year flood would be about 1,200. So a fair bit deeper.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Moore, quick question for you with regards to the relationship between the Chemainus watershed and the Chemainus River watershed and the Bonsall Creek watershed. Obviously, we focus more on the former, but based on the report here and the analysis provided, the Bonsall Creek watershed does have an important role here as well. And I don't know if you know, in years past, this was a big focus of our municipality when we developed a management plan for that watershed as well. But yeah, I wonder if you want to comment on that, just how the role the Bonsall Creek watershed plays in these issues and how much they're going to be part of the future solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding of it, during the larger floods, the floodwaters from both mix together. When the water from the Chemainus River goes into White House Creek, it flows both into Bonsall Creek on one side of the rail line and then back into the Chemainus River on the other. We also heard from the two gentlemen earlier tonight about the Quist Farm and how the water stays there a lot longer than it used to, and possible drainage issues there. So I think the Bonsall Creek management plan spoke to maintaining that creek channel as well, in terms of it's more vegetation, I think, that chokes that. They don't get the sediment inputs, the gravel coming down from the upper watershed there. But yeah, it looks pretty obstructed in some places as well.
Yeah, Mr. Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to add that there is a discrete sediment pond area on the Bonsall Creek that was cleaned out recently and was constructed with the intent of being able to collect some of the sediments that would be coming off the hillside. And we have the ability to go in on a regular basis to clean that out.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
So yeah, just before we move, just maybe provide a bit of context for all the council on this. So the motion that's before us, it's based on what we passed at the Cowichan Valley Regional District Board last week, and is slightly different than what had initially been proposed to us by the CVRD staff, although I think is consistent with what they've been recommending. You'll notice on point 2, the last sentence there, we've added on including prioritize gravel/debris removal as an immediate action. So that really speaks to concerns raised by some of the local farmers in the area, like Mr. James, Mr. Allingham, and again, I think is consistent with what you've read in Mr. Moore's report, where he's really put a strong emphasis on the gravel sediment removal as an immediate action that, again, isn't going to necessarily address the 1 in 200 year flood, but on a year-to-year basis could make a big difference. So having said that, Councilor Justice, you'd like to move the recommendation?
Happy to move it.
Moved, seconded by Councilor Stash. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so that takes care of item 11.2, which again we moved up. So now we can move on to bylaws for section 7. The first bylaw is under 7.1. Over to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so zoning amendment bylaw number 3909 received a third reading following public hearing on June 7th and Ministry of Transportation approval on June 16th. The bylaw proposes to amend section 53 sub 4 of zoning bylaw number 2950 by adding an exemption for 7245 Bell McKinnon Road to permit a maximum of 2 residential
buildings, with the smaller building being limited to a maximum of 92 square meters of livable floor area. If adopted, a detached accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, will be permitted at 7245 Belmickenin Road. The recommendation is that council adopt zoning amendment, section 53 exemption, bylaw number 3909, 2023.
Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Callio. We've discussed this quite a bit already. Can we call the question? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.2, back to you, Ms. Martineau.
Okay, so traffic amendment bylaw number 3917 is before council for first three readings. The bylaw proposes to amend sections 7 sub 2 and sub 3 of traffic bylaw number 2276 to increase the parking limitation for trailers and vehicles exceeding 5,500 kilograms in weight from 2 hours to 4 hours. Their recommendation before council has three parts to it. That council, one, give first, second, and third readings to traffic amendment bylaw number 3917, 2023. Number two, authorize the Director of Engineering to install signage at Croft Street in Chemainus between Mill Street and Alder Street that A, restricts the parking of vehicles over 5,500 kilograms and trailers to no more than 4 hours, and B, advises the public that vehicles or trailers violating the parking restrictions will be towed and how to recover their vehicle or trailer. And three, authorize the Director of Engineering to install signage at Duncan Street in the south end between University Avenue and James Street that A, restricts the parking of vehicles over 5,500 kilograms and trailers to no more than 4 hours, and B, advises the public that vehicles and trailers violating the parking restrictions will be towed and how to recover their vehicle or trailer.
So would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Stash, seconded by Councillor Callio. Councillor Stash?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just wanted to thank council and staff for the extra time to get feedback from the Chemainus BIA and the Chamber of Commerce, and both seem to feel that the change from 2 hours to 4 hours was great, would meet the objectives of staff and council. So just wanted to thank everybody for making that change. And the only clarity I wanted just to follow up on was that I don't know if it will be worded in here or if that's for future, because my understanding is we're going to be looking at the whole North Cowichan with regards to parking and traffic, was that the two specific spots in Chemainus would be the RV only parking that they are. I don't know if that would be for Mr. Rietsma, or I believe he would be the one speaking to that. But
You want to take it?
Just because in Chemainus, as we all know, there's two spots that are RV only right now, and I just was clarify that, does this change that? Being that there's new signage coming, or it would just be an additional signage?
Hi there.
Hi. Mr. Mayor, this is Mr. Chang, our new transportation engineer.
Yeah, nice to finally meet you in person.
Thank you. So to answer your question, does this apply to the RVs? So yes, it does apply to any vehicle that is exceeding 5,500 kg or trailers.
Sir, clarity on my question was that, no, I'm aware of that and support it. Chemainus is unique in its particular that it has two RV only spots on Croft Street. And my question was that those RV only spots remain as they are, and then this new signage would be an additional with clarity on the restrictions.
Correct.
Fantastic.
It does not change the RV status.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we ready to call the question? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We can now move on to reports. The first report, item 8.1, the annual report. And I'm going to provide the CAO an opportunity to introduce this, but what I would just highlight for council is that so for most of our agenda items, there's a public input period where members of the public can weigh in on agenda items. We do things a bit differently with the annual report for the municipality. So typically after staff introduce the report on the agenda, we would open it up for public input at this time of the meeting rather than through the regular public input period. But I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Swaby, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The annual report, the purpose is for council to consider the 2022 annual report in an open public meeting and receive submissions and questions from the public in accordance with Section 99 of the Community Charter. And the recommendation after you have that public input from staff is that council accepts the 2022 annual report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Swaby. So before I open the floor to the public to share their comments and questions on the report, I'll first ask the corporate officer if we've received any written submissions.
So there were no submissions received by the June 16 deadline in response to the notice that we published on the website, notice board, social media, and in the June 8th editions of the Cowichan Valley Citizen and the Chemainus Valley Courier.
Great, thank you, Ms. Martineau. I'll now open the floor to any members of the public who would like to share their comments on the annual report or ask a question to council, and I'll start with those in the gallery before turning to the virtual attendees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I did not realize this was going to be the public opportunity for the annual report, nor have I had time to look at it, but I'm going to ask a question if I may. What is the total of the Climate Action Energy Plan reserve funds for 2022, please, if someone is able to pull that up? And like I said, so this is the regular public forum sessions that we used to, okay.
Yeah, I'll
Didn't realize, thank you. Just if that's available sometime in the next few minutes, that would be really important. And the reason I ask the question is because it's a tax that's been going on since 2013, and there doesn't appear to be an end date to the attempt to charge a carbon tax in the municipality of North Cowichan to reduce emissions with a Trans-Canada highway driving right on through. There's no end date, and there doesn't seem to be a legitimate reason to continue this tax with endlessly. So, and I know last time it's been over $500,000. So do you happen to have that?
Yeah.
I know you're trying to spend it like crazy, but go ahead. 2022?
Yeah, 2022. Councilor Manas just pointed out it's in the
Reserve fund.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, just bear with me for a second.
Oh, thank you. No, that's great.
So this is the balance as of December 31st, 2022, $693,855, and that's on page 62 of the annual report.
Okay, another shock effect. This tax has got to be discussed seriously because it's the most unfair tax at a municipal level. In addition to provincial taxes and federal carbon taxes, we as citizens of North Cowichan have no ability to have any control over the emissions in North Cowichan, and nor do we have any real responsibility in the amount of emissions that are being discharged. So I'm raising this as a really big red flag.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Benson. And every year,
and I have every year for the last few.
Yeah, and every year through the budgeting process, any member of council can bring forward a motion.
I thank you, because this really has become a climate activism council, hiring climate activists, environmental people. Like the cost to us as taxpayers, in addition to the tax, is really way over the limit. With David Preekshot and Jennifer Aldcroft, new positions, new reports, new studies, this has become onerous, like really unfair and quite, I think, not at the municipal level of responsibility. So I appreciate you listening to me. A lot of people know nothing about this tax. When I mention it to them, they're shocked. So I just want to bring it up that it's huge, and I really don't have time to chase it a whole lot. I put it in your laps because that's your job. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
I'll now ask if there, sorry, Councillor Stash, I saw your hand come up.
I just wanted to share that that reserve fund isn't accurate to where it is right now, Your Worship, and how much it was used this year to keep taxes down, and it was actually invested, I believe, back into our EV fleet upgrades that are be going on with our curbside programming that's being implemented, and also significant investment into the Crofton Fire Hall. So while that number does sound high right now, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of 2023, it's going to be significantly less because it's been well utilized.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Stash. I'll now ask if there are any other members of the audience who would like to step forward and ask any questions regarding the annual report. All right, now I'll now turn to the virtual attendees. I'll ask IT staff if there are any of the virtual attendees with their hands raised.
There is not, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. So we do have a motion in front of us. Could I ask if a member of council would like to move the recommendation? Councillor Estache. Oh,
Sorry,
Councillor Estache.
Usually
Yeah.
it's the hand up and nod that, yes, I'd
Okay,
like the
so
motion
you
to.
move the recommendation.
I'm moving
okay.
the recommendation,
Yeah,
Your Worship.
The council accepts the 2022 annual report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Justice seconds it. Any discussion? Councillor Justice?
Thank you. I've got one minor beef with this. This is probably for the next annual report, but I'll let you figure it out. So in the community profile section, the report says a community of communities. North Cowichan is made up of several unique communities. It includes Chemainus, Crofton, Maple Bay, and the South End, which is comprised of smaller neighborhoods that are centered around the Duncan area. And compare that to the OCP, which says we are a community of communities, including Crofton, Chemainus, Maple Bay, Cowichan, Belmackinnon, Berkey's Corner, and South End Central University Village. It goes on. This is maybe a minor quibble, but Belmackinnon, Cowichan, and Berkey's Corner are all missing from the annual report, and I sort of understand why Belmackinnon might be overlooked because it's sort of a future neighborhood, and Cowichan is really just a residential neighborhood. But I think at this point we really need to be thinking about Berkey's as a distinct community. I mean, not only is it geographically separate and a fast-growing residential and commercial center, but it also, in the new OCP, has its own designated village residential and village core sections. So I think we really need to, I don't know, that's my comment.
All right, thank you, Councillor Justice. Councillor Finlay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and this is kind of going into the weeds on this report just a little bit, but something jumped out at me. Maybe I missed the discussion when we were going through budgeting, but on page 56 of the report, the land additions is $2.3 million, and I just don't recall what that might have been. So my question to staff is what that addition of 2.3.08390 would have been.
Mr. Swaby or Ms. Soldar?
I apologize, I do not have that at my fingertips, but I can definitely get it and report it back to council. I can't remember exactly which land was purchased this year.
Follow up?
Thanks. Yeah, follow up on page 61, yeah. And I think I've asked Ms. Soldar this before, but I honestly don't recall the answer. Reserves for property acquired for taxes is the same number every year, has been for probably 10 or 12 years. And it's a big number, so I know that some other residents might look at that and go, what's that for? And if you do research like I did and go back and look at every single annual report since 2008, then you kind of wonder what it's for. So I'm just curious if there'd be an explanation for the $2,341,177 on the books. Please.
Unfortunately, I'll also have to report back to council on that. We did the statements a while ago, and so I don't have that information at my fingertips tonight. But I can definitely report back to council.
Councillor Justice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So since Councillor Finlay sort of started down the road of questioning finances, this is perhaps a bit of a heavy question, but I think it makes sense when we're looking at, our reflecting on our community in our annual report. I'm always curious, looking at our financial statements, whether there's any real measure of our overall financial health. And I apologize, Ms. Soldar, if I'm repeating myself, because I have asked about this in the past, but it sort of remains a bit elusive to me. But I mean, the bottom line in the consolidated statement of operations, the accumulated surplus is now $340+ million, and that would seem to suggest to me, especially because it's going in an upward direction, that we're in pretty good financial shape. I think you've pointed out before that the municipal reporting system reports undepreciated costs, which is obviously an issue. But I mean, ultimately, the reality seems to be we're having a hard time keeping up with crumbling infrastructure and the level of services that we provide, and we're being challenged by inflation and rising level of costs, and by climate change and extreme weather cleanup and a housing shortage and homelessness and an opioid crisis and much, much more. And again, we seem to have an infrastructure debt that keeps on giving. It dwarfs our ability to pay, certainly dwarfs the accumulated surplus in terms of how much we owe. So I just wonder whether, you know, that financial reporting system that we're obligated to use is misleading us slightly. I guess ultimately the question is, how do we know if we're on a path towards being able to pay for the infrastructure deficit and all the other challenges coming our way? Is there any indication in our financial reporting that would give us either confidence or pause?
So the accumulated surplus term is a term that is used in public sector financial statements, but if you look at what's included in that, it actually includes the value of our capital assets. So while it does grow, it's not indicative of cash or what people would normally think of as a surplus. It's not extra money. It is just what the accounting term that we use to include essentially our assets and minus our liabilities. And so it could be considered somewhat misleading, and so some of that is why we do the additional reporting that we do throughout the annual report, is to try and make our financial information a bit more usable for the average reader. The Public Sector Accounting Board is also working on some changes to financial statements that will actually hopefully help to make things a bit more easy, and that should be seen with respect to financial statements for the year ended in 2024. And so we can bring to you some ratios. There are some ratios that accountants use to determine exactly that, our ability to pay. And so we are in a very healthy position in North Cowichan. We are able to pay for the things that we currently have. However, as we've brought forward to council many times, and we'll be bringing forward again through the upcoming budget process, which is not very far away. Sorry that I know you just finished, but we will be bringing a lot more information with respect to asset management and our need to replace our assets in the future, and how much or little money we have for various different asset classes to assist with that endeavor.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that, sort of.
Any further questions from council? We've got a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is item 8.2, which is the Housing Supply Act report. And the purpose is to provide council with information about the Housing Supply Act, housing supply regulation, and implications for the municipality of North Cowichan. Staff's recommendation is that council direct staff to prioritize initiatives and resources for responding to the Housing Supply Act and housing supply regulations in the 2024 business planning and budget processes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Swaby. Any questions from council? Councilor Toporowski. Moved by Councilor Toporowski, seconded by Councilor Callio. Councilor Finlay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And reading through the act itself, there's one item that really jumps out at me as troubling for us, and that is, well, troubling for me. Housing target order. The minister may, by order, establish housing targets for a specified municipality in relation to housing supply, including the availability and affordability of housing. And the issue I obviously have with that is we don't control what housing gets built and where it gets built and when it gets built and how affordable that housing is when it's built. So I'm a little troubled by that, because that definitely puts us in a potential issue where we might be getting the province stepping in, and perhaps staff can comment on that. I've got another comment after that as well, if that's okay.
Mr. Mayor, we share the concern. I've heard federal ministers talk about if they were in power, that it would require doors to be open of units to count. I've heard at a local level that, or on a provincial level, that it could be just the approval processes, which we have quite a number in the approval process. So it's a bit of an unknown right now, and we're watching carefully the other municipalities that are also on the naughty list that are performing under the guise of the province right now, and we'll report back when we understand that better.
Thank you, Mr. Swaby. Councillor Finley, you had another question?
It's more of a comment. I know if this comes down to us where we actually get our whatever order is given, there's definitely several developments that are unfortunately outside of the UCB, but some also in the old LAPs that could definitely help us meet those targets if and when that does come down from the province. Thanks.
Yeah, I think at this point there are quite a few unknowns, and I know there's we're trying to prepare in case we are handed these targets and identified as one of the communities where they are going to be applied, but we don't yet know that. We may well be added to the list as it expands, or we may not. But my understanding is, and again, we don't have this in any official communication, but that the idea is to build this around, you know, what communities have established through their official community plans and their urban containment boundaries, which are designed to accommodate significant growth, not just over the next 5 years, but over the next 20-year period. But I'll go to Councillor Justice and then to Councillor Stash.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of thoughts or concerns that I'd just like maybe some added clarity from staff, if that's possible. I guess my first concern is that the recommended motion, the motion that we've got on the floor is not fully clear to me, but in terms of implications it has. I really do not know what sorts of things would be authorizing staff to do, and what level of staff resources are at play here, or what other priorities might be delayed or sacrificed, in fact, by making this a priority. So that's one thing I'd like a bit more clarity on. The second, if you don't mind me just going for it, is it seems that we're jumping before we know how high, or even whether we need to jump at all. I think, as the report says, in many ways, North Cowichan Council has already prioritized housing, so complying with the Act and regulation will reinforce existing priorities and work that is already happening. So acknowledging that there's a likelihood of increased requirements for reporting, do we really know whether, even if we are included in the list, whether we're going to have to do much differently than we're doing?
Thank you. I think that's why the wording of the motion was crafted the way it was to allow some relief to council to evaluate any proposals that we make in the budget against any other priorities that you may have. So it was definitely with all the unknowns that we would bring this forward during the business planning and budget processes, so that you could have doesn't mean we're going to do them, you have to approve them in the budget, and it would allow you to weigh them against other priorities, and we'll have more information at that time on whether there is any urgency to meeting specific targets or other mandates that the province may have.
Thank you.
Councillor Stash.
Thank you, Your Worship. This question might be for Mr. Swaby or Mr. Conway. With this, as it says, we're looking at prioritizing initiatives, and immediately what comes to my mind is what I think collectively as council we've prioritized as quickly as possible, and of course with staff limitations, that new zoning bylaw. So my question, out of my own personal, where I've leaned towards and my beliefs are, is in that I feel to address some of these things that the ministry wants, are we going to be looking in through removing exclusionary zoning as something that aggressively addresses the bureaucracy of what can be built where and when within a community is such that Vancouver's done it, Victoria's done it, and it's such that single family housing can still exist, but that we open up our areas so that homeowners can build what they need and we can fill those spaces. So are we looking at I guess in the term they use is the missing middle to that, and will that be something that's going to be looked at in our zoning bylaw, and when can we expect our zoning bylaw? Because I think our zoning bylaw, would meet, enacting that right away will give developers clarity and meet the targets of the ministry, and we're doing that work already as such that everybody who's spoken here says we know how hard staff is working. So my question is just, when do we feel that we might be looking at that zoning bylaw? And is it looking at that, as I say, removing exclusionary zoning? So typically the word was that it's single family only in areas, whereas we actually look at allowing a mix of residential developments, and normally I guess using the terms that used to be used were just an R1 area, whereas it could be nothing but one single family on a residential lot.
Mr. Mayor, the project will be coming forward in the fall, and I don't think it's been specifically determined yet on how that might fall out, but we're certainly alive to the desire to possibly have some zoning in the areas that you're talking about, but we need to check in with council and get some feedback on the direction we're going. I do not think in my mind that a zoning bylaw will actually it won't be really the tool to meet the housing goals, because typically it'll be the rezonings to upzone that will provide the greatest bang for the buck for housing. Unless council really is aggressive with pre-zoning vacant lands, and that may be something that council is interested in doing. You never know.
Just for council's information as well, so in 2017, we blanket rezoned most of our single-family areas within the urban containment boundary to allow secondary suites, and which is permitted, up to thousands of potential secondary suites through that change. In my understanding, and perhaps Mr. Conway can weigh in on this, there hasn't been a whole lot of uptake since we made that major change to our zoning bylaw.
Mr. Conway.
Yes, the mayor is correct that there was some amendments made to the zoning bylaw to broaden where secondary suites are permitted. The R2 zone for many years only allowed single-family dwellings, and it now permits secondary suites. We haven't received a lot of building permit applications for suite conversions. We get a few of those every year, but it's not a large number. We don't have a really solid understanding as to how many suites were pre-existing that were not legal, that are now legal from a zoning point of view, that still may not comply with the building code requirements or the building bylaw. What we are hearing a lot about, though, is interest in detached second dwellings, the garden suite or a carriage house, that type of second dwelling, and that is something that is likely to come forward as an option to include that kind of housing within residential zones, both in the urban containment boundary and outside of it as well. So you're likely to see some options presented through that zoning bylaw project for that type of housing.
Great, thank you, Mr. Conway. Councillor Stash, follow-up?
Yes, actually a follow-up to that, Your Worship. So on the previous council I was on, we unanimously supported exactly what you said, is that you upzoned all areas to allow secondary suites. But what we also did as a council there is we allowed all those lane homes, and anybody building a garage could build a loft above the garage for a secondary suite. But then thirdly, what we also did is we put a tax incentive in there, so that you had 5 years free taxes on that increased assessment, up to a maximum of a certain dollar value. But it actually spurred people coming forward and getting development permits to build secondary suites, being that it was a small amount of money to invest into a housing crisis, because at that time where I did used to live, it was actually, I think the vacancy was 0.03. So based on CMHC numbers. So there was a little bit of what this previous council did, but a little bit of a support and incentive on the homeowners to help with their costs. So glad to hear we're looking at those accessory dwelling units as well.
And if I could just comment on Councillor Istash's observations, and the affordable housing policy that council has given some direction on and is will be coming back this summer does have specific provisions for accessory dwelling units that include looking at reductions in fees for things like development cost charges and other provisions that would make it more financially incentivized for homeowners or property owners to provide that kind of housing, more viable for them to build it with reduced costs. So there are some recommendations coming forward through that policy as well as through the zoning bylaw project.
Great, thank you, Councillor Stash. Mr. Conway, any further questions? I'd just like to state to council and staff and members of the public, I appreciate the comment in Mr. Conway's report about the, and I'll just read it out here. While approving more housing, reduce application processing timelines or valid policy objectives, delivering them may require trade-offs with other land use planning objectives such as environmental protection, securing affordable housing and community amenities, ensuring adequate servicing is available, ensuring the new development is paying for itself, and that new development is contributing to the visions, principles, and goals as set out in the official community plan. And I think that's something that as a council we've got to keep a close eye on. We put a lot of time and effort in developing our official community plan. It does allow us to accommodate a significant amount of growth over the next 20 years. And, you know, I know from my perspective, I'd rather not see us, ignore those environmental protection priorities, waive requirements for affordable housing or requiring development to pay for those infrastructure costs up front. Because while that may help in the immediate term and increasing some of the supply of housing, it's going to create long-term problems for this this municipality. And there was discussion earlier on with regards to our annual report about the long-term liabilities we have with regards to infrastructure. And if we're not requiring development to pay for those infrastructure costs up front, we're just putting that off to future generations to pick up the tab. So again, we've got an official community plan that sets a course where we can absorb a significant amount of growth over the coming years, which I'm confident is going to match any targets from the province if those are established for our municipality, and would rather move in that direction without having to sacrifice these other important priorities here at the municipality. So on that note, I believe it was moved and seconded. Could we call the question? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 8.3. Mr. Swaby.
Mr. Mayor, this 8.3 is the travel expense policy, and the purpose is to introduce the travel expense policy for council's approval. The recommendation is that council approve the travel expense policy as attached to the June 21st, 2023 report from the Chief Financial Officer.
Someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Manass, seconded by Councillor Callio. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to item 8.4, and as was discussed at the beginning of the meeting, there has been some slight changes to the recommendation for item 8.4. Over to you, Mr. Swaby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose is to consider allowing BC Ferries construction at the Crofton Terminal to its timber trestle from July 18th to August 11th, 2023. And I'm not sure I have the amended motion. I think the motion's the same. Yeah, it's just the date. So the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, is that council direct the Chief Administrative Officer or my delegate to use the discretion when directing bylaw compliance to officers to enforce noise bylaw 2857 infractions occurring outside the regular construction hours between July 18th and August 11th, 2023, while BC Ferries completes the timber trestle construction at Crofton Terminal.
Great, thanks, Mr. Swaby. Someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Callio, seconded by Councillor Manhas. And I understand we have a representative from BC Ferries present, if any members of council have any questions. You're off the hook. All right, the motion's been moved and seconded. There being no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to notices of motion. 9.1, Coastal Douglas Fir and Associated Ecosystems Conservation Partnership. Over to you, Councillor Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion of which I'm making notice is that council directs staff to investigate the financial and resource impacts of joining the Coastal Douglas Fir and Associated Ecosystems Conservation Partnership and obtain feedback from the Cowichan Nation Working Group prior to reporting back to council in order to facilitate a council decision on whether or not North Cowichan should join the conservation partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Justice. So again, he's giving us notice that that will be debated on at the July 19th regular council meeting. We now move on to new business, and first item of new business we moved up and dealt with already. We now move on to item 11.2. Over to you, Councillor Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that council direct staff to, one, review what other communities are doing to protect their children and citizens from exposure to drug use in public places such as Kelm River, Nanaimo, and Kamloops. 2, engage whatever other agencies necessary to ensure that North Cowichan's children and citizens remain safe while using public places and free from exposure to drug use. And 3, draft a safe public places bylaw restricting drug use in certain public places within North Cowichan's municipal boundaries. Mr. Mayor,
I would just get a seconder, and then you're first to speak to it. Second by Councillor Finley. Over to you, Councillor Manhas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we all know, on January 31st of this year, the federal government, the province, decriminalized the use of possession of some certain hard drugs for personal use to the tune of 2.5 grams. And as a result, we have seen increased use of drugs in public places. We are seeing it in our businesses. We're seeing it around our businesses and public places within North Cowichan. And many of these public places are being used or are near school grounds, playgrounds, parks, and shopping areas. And the children and the citizens of North Cowichan are vulnerable to these unsafe conditions and taking place on or near these public places. So therefore, I know this is one of the items that we discussed in our workshop today, and this will be one of the items that came forward as a recommendation as the motion you had read out today. But I think it's urgent to bring this up quicker than at the next meeting, because I think we're seeing a lot. Our children are being, and the general public is being disgusted. This is some of the word I've heard from the general public out there of the open use, and there's no consequences. And are we going to let our children be subject to this? Is this going to be the new norm? So I think it's pertinent that we move on this ASAP, to move this forward now, and then integrate this bylaw into what we decide to the outcome of our workshop motion that we passed today, this afternoon. I'd like this in place by September for sure, especially when kids are going back to school. Let's protect our children. Where we got to. I'll give you an example. Councillor Finley and I did a demonstration a few months ago, and we have an OPS site right there, but openly there's people still doing hard drugs right outside the OPS site. Well, there's kids are walking by from school, going from Cowichan School to Wendy's or else going to McDonald's. I just think that's unacceptable. We are creating a norm here in society. Is this what we want our society to be? I'll leave it at that for now.
Great, thank you, Councillor Manhas. I've got Councillor Justice next, then Councillor Finley, then Councillor Toporowski.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I find myself in alignment with some aspects of the intent of this motion, but not necessarily the details. I think some of the details can get us into a little bit of hot water. In particular, I mean, I definitely think we should be examining closely what other communities are doing, and especially some of the legal challenges that they're facing. But as for drafting a new bylaw, I think we should really think very carefully about the existing bylaws that we've got and how they might be adjusted or adapted to it. And as for engaging what other agencies are necessary to ensure North Cowichan's children and citizens remain safe, it seems to me that this is simply just too unspecified, unclear, and would be a very difficult thing to fulfill. So I think it's the wording and the specificity of the wording may get us into a bit of trouble. So I guess what I'm saying is I could probably support the first part of the motion, but not the second or third part as they're written. But given the motion that we approved in our workshop that Councillor Manhas has mentioned and that you, Mr. Mayor, reported on earlier, I think it's probably best to refer this back to staff for consideration alongside of those other measures that we're considering. So, Mr. Mayor, if you would entertain a motion, I would like to make a motion to refer this back to staff to be brought back to council integrated into the larger packet of measures that we're going to be getting. So
it's been moved. Do we have a seconder?
That was an amendment to the motion?
No, it's a referral. So the motion is to refer the recommendation back to staff to integrate it into the larger report that's being planned. Is that accurate, Councillor Justice?
Yes.
Yeah. I think Ms. Martineau is going to. Oh, okay.
Oh, no, here, sorry, found it. So debate is 6. Okay, so it's debatable when applied to a debatable motion. And it's a majority vote, can't be amended, needs a seconder, so,
It's debatable.
I would say it is, because the motion is debatable that you're referring it to, or it's in reference to, so the motion to refer is debatable.
Okay then. So you've moved it, and was there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stash. All right, my list is Councillor Finley, then Councillor Toporowski. Yeah, on the referral, you got it.
On the referral, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think the original motion directs staff to review this, so a refer back to staff is redundant in my viewpoint. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my comment.
Councillor Toporowski.
Thank you. Based on the information that we heard from earlier from the people that were on the front lines, I'll support the referral at this time. Because I think this motion is ahead of what we were going to be looking into already too. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toporowski. Councillor Callio, then Councillor Stash. Okay, Councillor Stash, then Councillor Callio.
Thank you, Worship. Echoing the other councillors here, I do, overall to the intent of the motion, the original motion, or actually I can't speak to that right now, I don't believe. To the amended motion, I am going to be in support, being that the one crucial element, well, there's two here. Our resources and tasking, what were expectations of our bylaw officers and their limitations, and being that we don't have the resources to properly police that right now. But the biggest thing is that we're trying to put laws and restrictions in place for people that have absolutely nothing. And I absolutely feel the weight of the importance and care about the other citizens, and absolutely for the children and families and businesses impacted. I know the area well and feel deeply for the area. But as well, in the first line, in line one, is it says review what other communities are doing to protect their, the word children is theirs, but the citizens. We have a duty to protect those citizens that this bylaw intends to control. And through that, it keeps coming to council. Duncan Council's dealing with it. They deferred it again. We want to easily put bylaws in place to restrict people, but every time we try to put a temporary shelter or a place in here to give these people somewhere to go, we say no to it. Not my backyard, not here, it's going to affect that. We're at a place where we can't have both, and I can't support right at this time creating a safe public places bylaw that's going to restrict those people right now when we don't even have anywhere we can provide them. Our RCMP and our bylaw officers don't have anywhere to say, you can go here. They can go up there, give them a ticket, and then we literally cannot send them anywhere because we're at capacity. We don't have the supports. We don't have the mental health supports. We don't have the housing supports. We don't even have a simple place to sit in shelter with during the day because they keep getting referred and deferred and the ball kicked down the field that we can't even give them somewhere to go. Where, to speak for myself, I have the privilege to go to my home and lock my door and have my security cameras on my house and everything and sit and do whatever I want in my house because I have that privilege and that ability, and I have that simple basic human right of housing. We're talking about a bylaw here that speaks to the simple humanity of having housing, and yes, there are absolutely people that have been the casualty and the side effect of this, but we can't lose sight of those who are dying. The stats I believe right now is it 6.2 people a day or 6.2 right now that are losing to this crisis. So I absolutely have empathy and feel for those that Councillor Mount-Hess is representing with his original motion. And I do understand even that I just said that we're referring temporary warming shelters, but I think we need to put the supports and the safety net in place before we create laws to restrict something. So, and that was what the original intent of the safe consumption, the decriminalization, is to create a safety net for people to come out of the shadows, come onto the streets and be where they can be there for the safety, the support, and get the treatments. And now it's our job to not just friendly send advocacy letters to the provincial government and the federal government. Like, I think we almost need just I'd hate to say it as all of us as council just show up at someone's door and knock on it, but we're at that point. Like, it is a crisis. They've done these parts and they're forcing us to have debates on bylaws to protect the rest of our citizens when they need to step forward and allow us, if our job is to provide land as a municipality, great. But put the money behind it, give us the mental supports, the health and addiction supports, the housing. Enough talking on that part of it. Give us those tools. Those are the tools we need first. When those tools are in place, I'll gladly be the first to second your motion on a safe places bylaw immediately, and I'd be there putting my first hand up and passing that motion. But this time we have no safety nets for our residents who are the equal citizens. We have a duty to all of our citizens in North Cowichan, and even those at most risk of dying on a daily day that don't even have somewhere to go to the washroom. So how do we expect them? Yeah, I've gone on long enough. I thank you for the ability to speak to this, Your Worship, and I'll be supporting the motion to refer this back into the original workshop motion. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Stash and Councillor Callio. Perhaps to close.
I'd just like to say, we're speaking to the referral right now, right?
Yeah, just speaking of the referral, yeah.
Not Councillor Manas's motion, right?
Yeah, to refer his motion back to staff to integrate or to consider it as part of the large report that's coming back to council.
I'd just like to say that I'm not in support of Councillor Justice's motion. I'd like to support Councillor I'm losing my voice, Councillor Manas's original motion. I drive by that place 6-8 times a day, and sometimes it's clean, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's an absolute circus down there. And you know what? The other day I'm driving down the road and here's these people shooting up on the side of the street, and here's all the kids coming out from lunch, heading out to the gas station to go in and get themselves a Slurpee or whatever they're getting, and going to McDonald's, and they're walking right by open drug use in the streets. Granted, I personally think that the bylaw itself doesn't have a lot of teeth, but I think that the citizens and children and everybody else of our community need to know that we care about them as well as the homeless. And I agree with Councillor Istash. I've lost friends and relatives to the opioid crisis, and I know people are down on the street there right now, personally, and I have empathy for them. And like I alluded to earlier and spoke to in our workshop, and that is that I also have empathy for the people who are running their businesses down there, and the kids and people that are going by there. And what's going on right now is not working. Right? We're trying to house them, and I think that North Cowichan and our provincial government are working towards getting people housed in the valley, and I think that's one of the things we need to work towards. But I also believe that we need to show the people that we also care about what goes on the street for the regular citizen and the silent majority who's not speaking out. I believe every single person, and we saw that in statistics today that were given to us by our CAO, that people out there care about what's going on. And I think everybody cares, but at the same time, we need to have the rule of law, and we need to have a safe place for people to go, including the homeless themselves and the opioid affected people. They need a safe place. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Callio. I think we can all agree around this table this is an area we want to explore. I guess the challenge for me is we came out of our workshop and we identified more than a dozen areas that we want to closely look at as a municipality in terms of action items to respond to this crisis that we're facing in our community. The top of that list was an open use drug bylaw. We also had revised sidewalk and parks bylaw, nuisance enforcement bylaw, 24/7 policing or bylaw presence in the area, a social planner, a clean team, nighttime security, better coordination with other jurisdictions, more housing and social services, reestablishing a community safety office, housing detox and drug treatment facilities, patrols for the Salmonos Marsh area. We've seen a number of major encampments, or community policing as well. In my view, all of these are important and they all deserve equal consideration, and I'd much rather, as a council, that we take a holistic approach in tackling these issues rather than zeroing in on just one aspect of it, which is not going to, I think we all acknowledge is not going to fix the crisis. But I'll turn it to you to perhaps close, Councillor Manas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your comments, but I respectfully disagree because I think we have to act on this ASAP. Our kids are being, every day, they're seeing this. Can you imagine if your kids are going to these schools and what they see? Would you have a different opinion of the facts? Ensuring, I'm not saying to you, I'm saying just generally as a whole, not pinpoint. I was looking at you. Okay, it wasn't, okay. And then also ensuring public safety is one of our main and core responsibilities of any government. And with what, that's why one of our biggest budgets, the biggest budget in North Cowichan is our RCMP. Because we have to ensure safety of our residents, including children. So to say that, we cannot ensure safety, we can sure try hard to ensure safety. Never mind, it's, say, well, we can't ensure it, we can sure try hard. And like I say, our biggest budget for the North Cowichan right now is the RCMP. And, or it's because, for safety. Councillor Istar said, he can go home and turn the security cameras on. Why do we need security cameras? Because of our actions, what we've done, what we have created. And then it's not out of line because of this. What's happened the last 4 or 5 years? Just every business now is getting has to have cameras. More residences are getting cameras every day because we never had this 5 or 6, 7 years ago. And then also, there's no safe. There has to be a safety net for our kids also. I totally agree. We always say, the kids are our future. And if we're not jumping on this now, I don't know what. Thanks.
We could go back and forth. I don't think anyone around the table disagrees with that this is the biggest issue facing our municipality right now, biggest issue facing council. We're dealing with it on a daily basis. It's just a question of whether we zero in on one tool or look at all the tools available to us in the toolbox and try to get those implemented as a holistic package over the next couple months. Councillor Toporowski, then Councillor Justice, then Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. I didn't say a lot more earlier, but since the door's been opened by the other councillors, we shared passionately how we felt earlier in the workshop. We're not saying that we don't care about children with this motion. And I'm just talking in general. We're very passionate. You just shared how passionate you are about how you care about the community. We're not saying that we don't care about our community, but from the information that we received, I want to defer this back. It's not saying that I'm not going to support it afterwards. It's just to get more clear information on option number 1, where, Campbell River, Nanaimo, and Kamloops have done, have tried to do some things, and other municipalities are also looking at this as well. It's caught the attention of David Eby, our premier. We have to push him. And, I don't envy anyone that has to deal with this, whichever government that is. And we're all going to have to come together and work and get, come up with these solutions to move forward. And again, like Mayor just mentioned about the over a dozen recommendations of trying to address some of this. And again, we're having to deal with what's happening, but we're not alone. And I think, like I said, I don't disagree with your motion, but I would like to have that more information from our staff about that. I'm not saying that I'm not going to support it later. It's just that I need to have more information. Thank you.
Councillor Justice, then Finlay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I think Councillor Manhas understands that we all sort of are aware of the extent of the problem, and we're all more or less on the same page of wanting to do whatever we can to mitigate it and make it better for all citizens. This is really just a question of whether the motion that you're proposing for a new Safer Places bylaw, which I think you must acknowledge is not necessarily going to be effective in and of itself, because if people are breaking the law and there's nothing really in the bylaw that's going to actually stop them from breaking the law. They're just going to be breaking the law. And so I think the main point is that the intent of your motion, if thought through with a number of other measures, might be actually something that we can make more effective than it might otherwise be if considered on its own. And I think that's the disagreement we're having, and that's the point that I'm taking, is that looked at as an integrated whole, the parts can be, add up to a greater sum. And in fact, that sum can also affect those parts and make them more effective. So that's, I think, the basics of my position, and I think others.
Councillor Finlay?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think the reason I seconded the Councillor Manas's original motion was twofold. One is because there is an OPS site in that area that currently operates 11 to 7 p.m. and they're hoping to open it earlier, obviously. So the open use drug use on the sidewalk when there's a property right there for them to utilize as necessary, I think is quite important. And we pay $2.8 million a year to operate that site through the province. And that's a significant amount of money. And so again, the way the original recommendation was put forward was to direct staff and to draft. This isn't a decision on a bylaw today. And I think with timing and as Councillor Mann has said, trying to get this ahead of get it through quickly and get more discussion, especially at the next council meeting, would be important so that we can get something in place before school opens in September. Thank you.
All right, I think our positions on the motion are pretty clear. Are we ready to call the question regarding the referral? All right, I'll call the question then. Those in favor and opposed? Councillors Manas, Callio, and Finley opposed. The motion carries. We'll now move on through new business to item, this would be 11.3. It's the, or we've been, no, we still got one item under new business. It's from the consent agenda. Councillor Justice had pulled the annual forestry report, so it would have been item 2.2.1 under the items for information. Councillor Justice, you had a question regarding the report?
Yes, thank you. Is the forester available? Yes. Okay, great. My question was related to invasives, and I noticed the report notes that about $12,000 was spent on invasive removals, and that in addition to tansy ragwort, we've been removing Scotch broom at various locations on Mount Richards, Maple Mountain, and Stony Hill. And I would note that we've talked about Scotch broom removal in the past outside of the forest reserve. And outside of the forest reserve, the municipality considers the Scotch broom problem basically too overwhelming to act on, too big to take on. So I was wondering whether we could get an explanation of the forestry approach to removal of Scotch broom. I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that there's no intention to completely remove it. But I was wondering about what criteria are used to decide where to act within the forest reserve on Scotch broom, and I guess the secondary question is, why have we only spent $12,000 when the full budgeted amount is slightly higher than that?
Mr. Mason, over to you.
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Justice. In the forest reserve, the strategy is largely based on encroachment into newer plantations. So we target broom along roadsides, broom that's encroaching in younger plantations where we can manage the control and spread, or at least try and reduce the spread.
Oh, Mr. Mason, we're having a bit of trouble hearing you. Could you maybe speak up a little bit?
Is that better?
I think that's a little better. Thank you.
Is this a bit better?
That's much
way better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. My apologies. I'll restart. Generally speaking, we target broom and tansy that's encroaching into younger plantations to try and stop the control or stop the spread, to control the spread into younger plantations. Secondarily, we roadsides, anywhere high traffic corridors where we can reduce the spread, we'll target that as well.
a follow-up, Councillor Justice?
Yeah, just about the budget. So were all those, were all the new plantations basically covered off by the amount spent?
Yeah, there's crew availability issues at that time as well, and some staff. We do use that budget to control manual broom cutting in plantations as well. So there's another line item for plantation brushing that sometimes we'll use that budget to supplement that if we need to.
All right, thank you.
Next, I've got Councillor Stash, then Finley, then Manas.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, I just wanted to thank our forester, Mr. Mason, for the tour we had, because the timing was good for the municipal forest tour we had prior to getting a forestry report, and it was a really good tour. So I wanted to thank senior staff and Sean for putting that together, because it was a really good day spent in the municipal forest. So thank you for that, and that helped, better look at the numbers and review everything. Two quick comments, and then my last question will actually be for possibly Mr. Farkas or yourself, Your Worship. Quickly, I wanted to comment on the good job of limited resources and how well we were able to steward the forests and manage them and do road work and do some salvage, danger tree harvesting, and still, I know the way we're looking at them in a true financial sheet, but I'd look at them the same way we look at parks and recreation, that we were able to manage 6 forests for a small cost to the taxpayers of $300,000. In the same way we look at running our parks and recreation and all our hockey rinks at a loss every year as a taxpayer-funded benefit to the community. So that's my spin on looking at annual reports, and of course, going forward with our new forest review that should be coming up soon. We've done some really good work to show how that's something that isn't all that bad, and that we're still nearly $1 million in the reserve fund. So again, that goes to senior forest management and staff to do real good work on working within the budget constraints. All that being said, my question, Your Worship, is on the portion of that, on the lumber we had, and it said that it put in asterisks saying of the lumber salvage, 67% was exported rather than staying locally. And it did have the asterisk saying exported doesn't mean it's going overseas. It could mean it's going to the US. But my question is that something after we're done with the municipal forestry review, is that something we pull into the Economic Development Committee, being that there might be something that any stewardship work, sustainable harvesting, windfall, fire, anything down the road, when there's wood that comes out of there, is there something that the Economic Development Committee that can look at, whereas it's more of keeping it here in that value add aspect? Is there any value in looking at that portion of what comes out of our forests? Can we look at local mills or secondary manufacturing? Is that something that we should capture within the Economic Development Committee? So that could be to senior staff or to yourself, Your Worship.
Yeah, I saw Mr. Farkas' screen came up. Over to you, Mr. Farkas.
Yeah. So through you, Mayor, so that's definitely something that would be within scope of something the Economic Development Committee could look at. So we were just recent recipients of REDIP funding, and a part of that would be to work with a consultant and look at value-added products. So, certainly that would be within scope, and I would envision that, that will go before the Economic Development Committee is the idea of putting an action plan together. That would be work that we would anticipate that a consultant could take on and look for opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Finley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I found fascinating about this report was twofold. One, the gross revenue earned was $164 per cubic meter, and with a harvest cost of $68 a cubic meter, ending up with a net profit of $96 a cubic meter. And that's based on a obviously very small harvest due to windfall and fire protection. And obviously, if we were harvesting normally, that cost to actually harvest would be substantially less due to economies of scale. What I also find fascinating is $164 a cubic meter, substantially higher than what the UBC Forest Review had at $90 a cubic meter. And my understanding is that 164, give or take, $5 or $15 has been pretty consistent in the last couple of years. The other thing I found fascinating was 12,570 seedlings planted, which I think is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finley. Over to you, Councillor Manhas.
Mr. Mayor, this is funny how Councillor Finley and I think the same way. The guy has the exact same 164 cubic meters and the cost. I think this report should be sent to UBC actually to revise their future estimates for harvesting.
Right, any other further questions or comments from council? I'm going to go back to the item as it was presented under the consent agenda. So we have a recommendation that council receive for information the 2022 annual forestry report provided by the municipal forester. Moved by Councillor Finley, seconded by Councillor Justice. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. I believe that concludes new business. We can now move on to question period. So we'll start with the folks in the gallery and ask if there are any members of the public with any questions.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'd like to refer to Councillor Manhas's attempt to provide safe public places bylaw. And by drug use, and I happen to work with homeless in situations similar. So referring to the drug use in public places, it is an urgent crisis. It is about public safety, safety of our own community's children.
Sorry, Ms. Benson, sorry to interrupt, but it is question period.
There is a question
coming.
It's coming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have to lead up to it. Our children are being impacted negatively, emotionally, traumatizing exposure, and the concern that I have is the physical danger. There is a very vulnerable position that they are put in when they are going past these situations. So my question is, if we're not taking action now with a strong, clear message that public drug use is unacceptable and in fact criminal, when will something be done about it? When it's too late? So my thinking is, why could you not consider community service? If people, obviously they're not going to be able to pay a fine. What about community service? What about clearing out broom? I thought that coming over the Malahat today. Get a van of people, and when they have offended, but the thing about it is the message should be out there that it is unacceptable what they're doing. It's just way too dangerous. And if people are led then to solutions and treatment, there has to be an interaction that's getting them with their problems into a more suitable solution. And I really believe that we need to all be working together to find solutions. And I agree with the school return time. Was it a year and a half ago?
I hate to interrupt you, but I'm still waiting for that question.
No, that's okay. I stood on the corner for a month and a half, just helping people, the children, feel safer. So it's gotten way worse. Okay, thank you for that motion, Mr. Manhas. Appreciate your efforts.
Oh, and what was there a question though?
My question is, thank you, working together for community solutions. Give them a penalty. It won't be a fine, yeah, and you know what? A lot of them do get paid. They were paid today. So there's got to be accountability, and it's amazing how many people out there are willing to help that are homeless, will help with the guiding and the enforcing as to what is going on, but we do need solutions, and this is an urgent crisis, and I'm really concerned about the danger to our children, and they are being impacted. I hear from parents and grandparents, their children are traumatized. We've heard it, I think, from Ms. Richards as well.
Agreed.
For her sons.
Thank you, Ms.
So my
Benson.
question is, what can be done? Look for solutions, work together as a community and find the answers, but don't sit back on it to be in the group of what you had happen today, which sounds like it was very productive, and I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, very productive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks.
so much.
Yeah, I'll open up any other members of the public with questions for council.
Yes, hello. My name is Sheila, and I am a property owner just down the road from our mayor. I hesitate to get up here. My husband's so choked. He's left. He's working at a paid job. And my question being, we're not privy to what was said today. Understandably, that was a workshop. But in all due respect, some of us, okay, are trying to pay our tax bill. We happen to own 2 properties, okay? The one just down from the mayor, we're only allowed to have a shop, an accessory building. So I'm just wondering, when I heard, you know, with respect, Mayor, the list of things, yay long, and I just went, oh my goodness, that's going to cost a lot of money. So my one question is, I hope that all council members read my letter. And I come from a little bit of Ms. Benson's background, but a little bit of a similar angle. And my husband even wrote a letter, okay? And it only went to council members because in the past, I had response from the CAO's office, and I thought, well, wait a minute here. So I've always just sent them to council. So maybe it doesn't go into public record. But the cost of not doing something right now, ready for September, okay? I'm coming from a taxpayer standpoint, okay? Like I said, hesitated to ever get up here and to comment. But we were disallowed last summer, and Mr. Mayor said it to a neighbor, because of a kerfuffle on the road.
So,
okay?
Ms. Paul, I hate
So
to
my
interrupt,
question
but
is
we've
the
gotta keep
cost.
Just
Okay,
bear
the
with me for a
cost.
second. We've got to keep the question period focused on items on the agenda.
Well, that is the cost, what you might have heard today. We're not privy, but the cost of all those policing bylaws, all of the stuff, and has council ever counted the cost of not doing anything to protect the children? Okay, that's the real cost. The future, our children, the businesses, the 4 schools. So I have extensive background, but that's, I'm kind of coming from 2 angles. As a taxpayer, just under $10,000 tax bill between 2 properties, CVRD and North Cowichan. I'm not complaining, I'm saying some of us are coming from that angle, and yet I'm caring about the children and the cost of not doing something in time for school in September. And thank you, because it's been most frustrating. We have not Joseph and not Adriana who can speak to this. And some of us have not even fed our animals at home. My cats, my kittens eat raw food. And I'm going, you know what? You guys all make sacrifices. We're not privy to what happened in the workshop, and with all of that's not public knowledge. Okay, I understand. But Councillor Manhas tried to put something forth. And in my background, my degrees, my understanding, you build things to set up people to come and do drug use. And I wrote in my letter for a reason. They are bussed in here, they are shipped, they are given tickets.
Ms. Paul, I appreciate
So
the
that's-
comments, but it's
yeah.
question period. It's time
Okay,
for questions to
well, the
council, and I've
cost.
been very
Okay,
flexible.
thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other members of the public in the gallery, so I will turn to IT staff and ask if there are any virtual attendees with their hands raised.
There is not, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That concludes question period, and there being no other items on the agenda, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.